I wasn't supposed to get pregnant. I was just supposed to sign a piece of paper, secure a multi-million-dollar merger, and go back to my apartment to sleep. That was the deal. The Hayes family, my blood relatives who had spent the last decade bleeding my genius dry until I became a chronically exhausted shell of myself, had finally found a way to sell me off. The buyer was the Sterling Corporation, more specifically Marcus Sterling, the billionaire alpha CEO who ran his real estate empire with the warmth of a glacier and smelled like a suffocating blend of raw espresso and cedarwood. To appease the board of directors and the hungry Seattle press, Marcus and I were forced into a fake marriage, a corporate alliance wrapped in a PR stunt. The final clause of our nightmare contract was an heir. But since the thought of letting Marcus Sterling touch me made my skin crawl, and because I had successfully cultivated a lifestyle of absolute laziness to protect myself from corporate exploitation, we agreed on a surrogate. I was just the proxy. I was supposed to wear a fake silicone belly, pretend to be a glowing expecting omega, and cash out when it was over. That is how this story was supposed to go. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind to the afternoon it all went catastrophically wrong. The fluorescent lights of Harborview Genetic Center hummed with a sterile migraine-inducing buzz. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the Seattle skyline into a gray smear. I sat in the waiting room, wearing my favorite oversized gray hoodie, my chin resting heavily on the U-shaped travel pillow looped around my neck. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night all week, busy dodging my family's frantic calls and Marcus's passive-aggressive emails. Julian Hayes. The receptionist's voice cut through the quiet lobby. I blinked, pulling myself out of a half-sleep, and dragged my feet toward the desk. The board sent me. I muttered, my voice raspy. I am here to sign the proxy consent forms and get the baseline hormone tracker implanted. The Sterling Hayes contract. The beta receptionist didn't even look at me. She just typed frantically on her keyboard, a slight frown creasing her forehead as the screen flickered. A system update maybe, or a glitch. I didn't care. I just wanted to go home and eat my cereal. Right, room 2. She said, handing me an electronic tablet. Sign the consent forms on pages 3 and 4, then head straight back. The nurse is waiting. I took the tablet. The screen was a wall of legal jargon and medical terms. Anonymized reproductive inclusion, genetic material transfer, implantation protocols. It looked like the standard terrifying paperwork my family's lawyers always shoved in my face. My brain, running on fumes and sheer spite, refused to process a single word. I scrolled to the bottom, scribbled my digital signature, and handed it back. That was my first mistake. Room 2 smelled like antiseptic and fake lavender, a scent trying too hard to hide the reality of clinical procedures. A nurse I didn't recognize motioned for me to lie back on the exam table. She didn't ask questions. She didn't make small talk. She just glanced at the barcode on my digital file, checked a metal tray containing a single meticulously labeled vial, and got to work. I stared at the ceiling tiles. 1, 2, 3. I was expecting a quick injection, maybe a tracker for the fake pregnancy charade. There was a strange pressure, a cold sensation, and then a dull, deep ache in my lower abdomen. All done, the nurse said, snapping off her latex gloves. You might feel some cramping and temperature fluctuations over the next few hours. That is a normal reaction to the genetic integration. Drink plenty of water. Yeah, sure, thanks, I managed to say, sliding off the table. My legs felt unnaturally heavy, a strange wave of dizziness washing over me before I steadied myself. I chalked it up to the lack of sleep and the fact that I hadn't eaten anything but a granola bar since yesterday. That was my second mistake. I grabbed my U-shaped pillow, pulled my hood over my head, and walked out into the freezing Seattle downpour. The city was drowning in the late afternoon storm. I stood under the meager shelter of a bus stop awning, watching the headlights of passing cars bleed across the wet asphalt. The bus was 15 minutes late. By the time I finally stepped onto it, my clothes were damp and I was shivering. But as I slumped into a seat near the back, the shivering stopped. It was replaced by a burning. It started as a spark beneath my ribs, slow and insidious, before spreading outward. Suffocating heat crept down my spine and pooled heavy and hot in my stomach. I gripped the plastic edge of the seat in front of me, my knuckles turning white. I forced myself to breathe. In. Out. This wasn't a cold. This wasn't exhaustion. My body felt like it was waking up from a decade-long coma, every nerve ending screaming in sudden, terrifying awareness. And then the scent hit me. My own pheromone, usually a mild, lazy scent of sun-warmed blankets and soft vanilla, was changing. It was spiking, growing sweeter, heavier, but that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. Woven tightly into my vanilla scent, wrapping around it like dark, invisible chains, was something else. Bitter espresso, sharp, commanding cedarwood. I looked around the empty bus wildly. No one was there. Marcus Sterling wasn't here, but his scent was everywhere. It was in my nose, under my skin, echoing in the frantic beating of my heart. It was coming from inside me. A cold dread poured over me, extinguishing the heat for one terrifying second. The clinic, the glitch at the reception desk, the vial, the procedure. I pressed a trembling hand to my stomach, the scent of espresso and cedar wrapping around me, claiming me in the empty, rain-battered bus. I wasn't carrying a silicone belly. I was carrying the enemy. 50 floors above the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, my new reality was a glass-walled penthouse that felt more like a high-tech terrarium than a home. The Sterling Hayes PR machine had moved with terrifying speed. Within a week of my clinic visit, Marcus and I were officially married in a private, heavily NDA-guarded ceremony, and I was unceremoniously dumped into Marcus's meticulously curated life. The arrangement was supposed to be simple. Share the penthouse smile for the occasional paparazzi drone, and pretend we weren't two corporate pawns waiting for a massive merger to clear. We had separate bedrooms, separate lives, and a mutual unspoken agreement to ignore each other as much as humanly possible. It should have been easy. I had spent years perfecting the art of being entirely useless. While Marcus Sterling woke up at 4:30 every morning to punish himself on a rowing machine before donning a lethal Tom Ford suit, I rarely emerged from my bedroom before 11. My daily uniform consisted of sweatpants, my trusty gray hoodie, and the U-shaped travel pillow that I wore around the apartment like a medical neck brace. But surviving Marcus was proving harder than I anticipated, mostly because my own body had decided to betray me. Ever since that afternoon at the Harborview Genetic Center, I felt like I was slowly losing my mind. The nurse had warned me about temperature fluctuations from the hormone tracker I supposedly received, but this was ridiculous. I was constantly running a low-grade fever. My stomach churned at the mere thought of my usual vending machine diet. Worst of all, the scent hallucination I had experienced on the bus had not faded. It had intensified. The penthouse reeked of Marcus. Bitter, dark espresso, and sharp, commanding cedarwood. It was a classic aggressive alpha scent, the kind specifically designed to demand submission and dominate boardrooms. It should have repulsed me. My omega instincts, shaped by years of avoiding demanding alphas, should have been screaming at me to lock my door and run. Instead, I was completely humiliatingly addicted to it. It happened on a Tuesday. Marcus was out ruthlessly acquiring some tech startup, and I was alone in the cavernous living room. A violent shiver racked my frame, a sudden inexplicable cold that my hoodie could not fix. I wandered aimlessly, my teeth chattering, until I found it. A discarded charcoal gray suit jacket draped over the back of a dining chair. Before my rational brain could intervene, my hands were pulling the jacket to my face. The scent of espresso and cedar hit my senses like a physical weight. My knees literally buckled. It was embarrassing. It was pathetic. But I couldn't stop. I dragged the jacket to the massive leather sofa, curled into a tight ball, and buried my nose in the expensive wool. A heavy, drug-like warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the cold. I closed my eyes, entirely defeated by my own biology, and slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. I didn't know how much time had passed when I woke up, but the penthouse was submerged in the blue-gray twilight of a Seattle evening. I blinked heavily, my cheek still resting against the lapel of Marcus's jacket. Then I froze. Marcus was sitting in the armchair less than 3 feet away from the sofa. He was still wearing his dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his tie loosened, but he wasn't glaring at me. He wasn't typing furiously on his tablet or barking orders into a phone. He was fast asleep. Marcus Sterling, the billionaire insomniac who allegedly ran his empire on 3 hours of rest and pure spite, was sleeping soundly. His breathing was even the harsh, tense lines of his face completely smoothed out. And the air in the room, it had changed. My own pheromone, the lazy, mild scent of sun-warmed blankets and soft vanilla, had flooded the living room, blanketing the space in a thick, calming haze. It was wrapping tightly around Marcus's sharp espresso scent, neutralizing the tension, pulling the notoriously ruthless alpha into a state of total defenseless rest. I stared at him, my heart hammering wildly against my ribs. What the hell is happening to us? The sharp electronic trill of the penthouse landline shattered the quiet. Marcus flinched, his eyes snapping open. The vulnerability vanished, instantly replaced by the cold, calculating glare of a CEO. He looked at me, then down at his own jacket crushed in my arms. A complicated, unreadable emotion flickered across his face, but before he could speak, the phone rang again. I scrambled off the sofa, dropping the jacket like it was on fire, and grabbed the receiver. "Hello, Julian Hayes." I recognized the voice instantly. Dr. Cole, the head physician from Harborview Genetics Center. Her tone wasn't her usual polished, PR-friendly cadence. It was tight, panicked. "It is me," I said, rubbing my temples. "If this is about my hormone tracker acting up, I already know. I have been sick for 2 weeks." A terrible, heavy silence stretched over the line. I could hear her breathing. "Julian," Dr. Cole finally said, her voice dropping to a trembling whisper. "I need you and Mr. Sterling to come to the clinic. Immediately. Use the private underground entrance." Marcus had stood up. He was watching me closely now, his alpha instincts picking up on the sudden spike of absolute terror in my vanilla scent. "Why?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the phone. "What is wrong with the tracker?" "There is no tracker, Julian," she said. "There was a glitch in the system, a catastrophic labeling error. You weren't given the baseline hormones for the proxy simulation." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The nausea I had been fighting all week surged with violent force. The espresso and cedar scent in the room suddenly felt like a chain tightening around my throat. "What are you saying?" I choked out. "I am saying the pregnancy is not fake," Dr. Cole whispered. "The implantation was real, and the genetic material, it belongs to Marcus Sterling." The telephone receiver slipped from my trembling fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a hollow, echoing clatter. I didn't bend down to pick it up. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at Marcus. He was still standing by the armchair, his posture rigid, his dark eyes tracking my every shallow breath. He hadn't heard Dr. Cole's words, but he didn't need to. The sudden, violent spike of pure panic in my vanilla scent was already telling his alpha instincts that the world had just ended. "Julian," Marcus said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He took a slow step toward me like he was approaching a bomb about to detonate. "What did she say?" "It is real," I whispered. My voice sounded hollow, belonging to someone else entirely. "The glitch, the vial they used at the clinic. It wasn't the proxy baseline." Marcus stopped dead. His jaw tightened, the gears in his brilliant calculating CEO brain grinding as they tried to process a variable he hadn't accounted for. "Explain." "I am pregnant, Marcus." I finally snapped, the shock shattering into hysteria. I grabbed the edge of the kitchen island to keep my knees from giving out. "With your child. You didn't just buy my company, you accidentally knocked me up." Silence crashed over the penthouse. It was a suffocating, heavy quiet, broken only by the relentless Seattle rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a terrifying second, Marcus looked like he was going to break something. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles turning stark white. His scent, the bitter espresso and sharp cedar, flared with a sudden suffocating intensity, filling the room with an aggressive territorial dominance that made my omega instincts scream in terror. "We terminate," Marcus said flatly, his voice devoid of all emotion. It was his boardroom voice, the voice that gutted companies and fired hundreds without blinking. "I will call my legal team. We tear up the proxy contract, have the procedure reversed at a private facility in Switzerland, and draft a new NDA." I should have felt relieved. It was the logical solution, but the moment the words left his mouth, a revolt erupted inside me. My stomach gave a violent, agonizing lurch. The room tilted violently on its axis. A wave of nausea, sharper and more brutal than anything I had experienced all week, hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, wrapping both arms around my waist, and my knees finally betrayed me. I collapsed, squeezing my eyes shut as I braced for the hard impact of the floor. It never came. Marcus moved with a speed that defied human physics. Before I could fall, his arms were around me, catching me mid-collapse. He hauled me against his chest, his large hands gripping my shoulders with a desperate, crushing strength. "Julian," the boardroom CEO was gone. In his place was something entirely primal. The aggressive, suffocating edge of his cedarwood scent instantly transformed into a thick, heavy blanket of absolute protection. It enveloped me, pushing away the nausea, coaxing my frantic heartbeat to slow down. "Let go of me," I groaned, trying to push against his chest, but I was too weak. "You are freezing." Marcus growled, his voice vibrating deep in his chest. He didn't let go. Instead, he scooped me up effortlessly, carrying me to the sofa and setting me down amidst the pillows. He grabbed the wool blanket I had been using earlier and wrapped it tightly around my shivering shoulders. "I am calling my private physician," Marcus said, pulling his phone from his pocket, his hands actually shaking. "You are not leaving this penthouse. I am locking down the elevators." "What about Switzerland?" I muttered bitterly, clutching the blanket. Marcus stopped. He looked at me, his dark eyes blown wide, his breathing heavy. The alpha instinct, dormant beneath years of tailored suits and corporate discipline, had completely hijacked his brain. "No one is touching you," he said, the words rough and absolute. "And you are not going anywhere." That was the end of the fake arrangement and the beginning of a bizarre, terrifying hostage situation disguised as domestic care. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus Sterling, the ruthless billionaire, underwent a terrifying transformation. He canceled half his meetings. He started working from the penthouse dining table. And most humiliatingly, he became hyper-fixated on my completely useless existence. It peaked on a Thursday at exactly 2:14 in the morning. I was sitting on the kitchen floor in the dark, wearing my oversized hoodie, openly sobbing. I wasn't just crying, I was weeping with the kind of profound sorrow usually reserved for Greek tragedies. The kitchen light snapped on. Marcus stood in the doorway wearing silk pajama pants and a scowl, his hair a mess. "Are you in pain?" he demanded, crossing the kitchen in 3 strides. "No," I choked out, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "Then why are you crying on the floor in the middle of the night?" "Because," I sniffled, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes, "I want a taco, but not a good taco. I want a greasy, incredibly spicy, terrible taco from the yellow food truck under the Aurora Avenue overpass, and they do not deliver." Marcus stared at me for a long, agonizing minute. He looked from my tear-streaked face to the empty refrigerator, questioning every life choice that had led him to this exact moment. "You are weeping," Marcus said slowly, "over a taco." "It is the hormones," I wailed, burying my face in my knees. "Just let me be miserable." I heard a heavy sigh, then the sound of footsteps walking away. I thought he was going back to bed, leaving me to my misery. But a minute later, Marcus reappeared. He had pulled a trench coat over his pajamas and was holding his Aston Martin car keys. "Get off the floor," he ordered, his voice clipped, but his scent leaking a soft, exasperated fondness. "If you throw up in my car, I am adding a penalty clause to the merger agreement." I blinked up at him, my tears stopping instantly. The billionaire CEO was going to drive a $500,000 supercar into the Seattle rain at 2 in the morning to buy me street food. I scrambled up, a massive, embarrassing smile breaking across my face. I didn't realize how much the boundaries between us had eroded until the Sterling Hayes annual gala a week later. It was a mandatory PR nightmare. I was forced out of my sweatpants and poured into a tailored suit, standing next to Marcus in a ballroom full of sharks. I was exhausted, nursing a glass of sparkling water when Arthur Vance, a notoriously sleazy board member from my family's side, cornered me by the buffet. "Julian, my boy," Vance purred, stepping way too close. He smelled like cheap gin and artificial pine. "You are looking softer these days. Marriage must agree with you." Before I could back away, Vance's hand slid around my waist, his fingers pressing into my lower back. The air in the ballroom seemingly dropped 10 degrees. I didn't even see Marcus move. Suddenly, a hand clamped onto Vance's wrist with bone-crushing force. Marcus was standing right beside me. His eyes were completely black, stripped of all humanity. A wave of pheromones, dark, suffocating, and lethally possessive, blasted from Marcus, hitting Vance so hard the older man literally staggered backward, gasping for air. "Remove your hand," Marcus whispered, the sound more beast than man. "Before I break it." Vance scrambled away, pale and terrified. I stood frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked up at Marcus. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling, his gaze fixed solely on me. The protective warmth of his cedar scent wrapped around me, pulling me and claiming me in front of the entire room. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of my glass. I was supposed to hate him, but as I leaned slightly into his side, letting his heat ground me, I realized a terrifying truth. I didn't want him to let go. I wasn't trying to be reckless. I was just trying to reclaim a piece of myself. Living with Marcus had become a comfortable, terrifying kind of trap. The penthouse was an impenetrable glass fortress, and he was the dragon relentlessly guarding it. But I had left something critical behind at my old apartment. an encrypted external drive hidden under a loose floorboard. It contained a decade of my original software designs, the only tangible proof that I wasn't just the Hayes family's useless, lazy pawn. On a stormy Tuesday evening, Marcus was locked in his home office, ruthlessly dismantling an overseas subsidiary on a virtual board call. I figured I had a 2-hour window. One quick anonymous cab ride through the Seattle downpour, grab the drive, and be back before his alpha radar even noticed my vanilla scent had faded from the living room. That was a catastrophic miscalculation. The moment I stepped off the rusted elevator on the 3rd floor of my old building, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The hallway smelled like damp carpet and stale takeout just like always, but the air pressure felt entirely wrong. Heavy. Charged. I stopped in front of my door. The deadbolt was shattered, the wood splintered around the frame. My Omega instinct screamed at me to run to call Marcus to hide, but my drive was in there. My life's work. I pushed the door open an inch, holding my breath. The tiny apartment had been completely torn apart, mattress slashed, books thrown, chairs overturned, and standing in the center of the chaos, calmly pulling apart my desk drawers, was a woman in a sleek, water-repellent trench coat. She was a beta, judging by the lack of pheromones, but she moved with the lethal mechanical efficiency of a corporate mercenary. She turned locking eyes with me. A cold synthetic smile stretched across her face. "Julian Hayes," she said, her voice eerily pleasant. "You just saved me a lot of trouble. I was beginning to think I would have to drag you out of Sterling's ivory tower." "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I took a step back toward the open doorway, but she was impossibly fast. She crossed the room in 2 strides, slamming the broken door shut with her heel and trapping me inside. "I represent certain legacy members of the Sterling Board of Directors," she said, pulling a long silver cylinder from her pocket. It was a medical-grade auto-injector. A fake marriage for a merger was an acceptable PR stunt. An actual heir produced by a rival bloodline, that is a glitch my employers need fixed. My blood turned to absolute ice. My hand flew instinctively to my stomach. "It is a simple, localized abortifacient," she murmured, stepping closer. "Quick, clean. You pass out, you wake up in an hour, and this unfortunate biological error is erased. Sterling will think the stress caused a natural miscarriage." I had spent my entire adult life running away from conflicts. I was the king of giving up, of playing dead to survive. But as she raised the injector, something feral and violently protective snapped awake inside me. "Do not touch me," I snarled. When she lunged, I didn't cower. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the shattered side table and swung it with all my might. It caught her shoulder, sending her stumbling into the wall. I scrambled for the door, my fingers slipping on the broken deadbolt. But she recovered instantly, grabbing a fistful of my hoodie and yanking me backward. I hit the floor hard, gasping for air. She pinned my shoulder down with her knee, her expression tightening in annoyance as she brought the needle toward my neck. "Hold still." I squeezed my eyes shut, thrashing wildly, trying to twist my body to protect my stomach. Then the world exploded. The apartment door didn't just open, it was literally kicked off its hinges. The heavy wood crashed onto the floor, splintering into pieces. The air in the room was instantly sucked away, replaced by a suffocating, lethal wave of bitter espresso and cedar wood. The pheromones were so thick, so violently aggressive, that the mercenary actually choked her eyes, widening in sheer terror as she looked up. Marcus was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was gone, his chest heaving, his eyes completely black, with an alpha's murderous rage. He moved like a blur. Before the mercenary could even pivot the needle, Marcus's hand clamped around her throat. He lifted her clean off the ground and slammed her against the drywall with bone-shattering force. The auto-injector clattered harmlessly to the floor. "If you ever come near what is mine again," Marcus roared, his voice vibrating with a demonic primal frequency that shook the floorboards, "I will not just kill you. I will bury you alive in the concrete of my next skyscraper. Tell the board I am coming for them next." He tossed her aside like a broken rag doll. She scrambled to her feet, gasping for air, and fled down the hallway without looking back. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain and my own ragged breathing. Marcus slowly turned to me. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his hands shaking with residual adrenaline. The terrifying, murderous aura evaporated the second his eyes met mine. He dropped to his knees in the debris, pulling me into his chest with a desperate, crushing grip. "I am here," he whispered into my hair, his voice cracking completely. "I have got you. I have got you." I buried my face in his neck, my fingers fisting into his expensive shirt, and finally let myself fall apart. Hours later, back in the absolute security of the penthouse, the adrenaline finally crashed. I was exhausted, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the needle. I was lying in my separate dark bedroom when the door creaked open. Marcus stood in the threshold, a silhouette backlit by the hallway lights. He looked exhausted, the weight of a war he was about to wage settling on his shoulders. "I cannot sleep," I whispered into the dark. Marcus didn't say a word. He crossed the room, pulled back the heavy duvet, and slid into the bed beside me. He didn't ask for permission, and I didn't put up a fight. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling my back flush against his chest. His cedar scent wrapped around me, a thick, impenetrable shield against the rest of the world. I closed my eyes, covering his large hand where it rested protectively over my stomach. We weren't rivals anymore. We were survivors clinging to each other in the dark, and I had never felt safer in my entire life. Waking up tangled in Marcus Sterling's limbs should have felt like a nightmare. Instead, it was the most profound, terrifying peace I had ever experienced. Sunlight spilled across the bedroom floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I was pressed flush against his chest, my head tucked under his chin. His arm was a heavy, secure weight across my waist, his hand resting exactly over where our child was growing. The room was saturated in his cedarwood scent, wrapping around my vanilla pheromones in a perfect, harmonious blend. For 10 minutes, I lay there listening to the steady, rhythmic thrum of his heartbeat, and I let myself imagine a life where this was real, where I wasn't a corporate hostage and he wasn't a ruthless billionaire, where we were just two people who belonged to each other. And then the panic set in. Cold, suffocating terror flooded my veins. I carefully slid out from under his arm, holding my breath as he shifted, grumbling softly in his sleep before settling again. I grabbed my oversized hoodie from the floor, pulled it over my head like a suit of armor, and practically fled to the living room. I paced the length of the glass-walled penthouse, my heart hammering. I was getting soft. I was falling in love with him. That realization was infinitely more dangerous than the mercenary with the needle. I had spent the last decade building an impenetrable fortress of laziness and apathy. People thought I was a useless, lazy omega because it was the only way to survive. When I was 18, I was the Hayes family's golden child, a coding prodigy. I worked 100-hour weeks designing the software architecture that made my uncle millions. I gave them everything desperate for their love and approval. They rewarded me by stealing my patents, working me until I was hospitalized for severe exhaustion, and then replacing me when my brain finally burned out. The lesson was permanently scarred into my psyche. The moment you become valuable to someone, they will bleed you dry. And now I was carrying the heir to the Sterling Empire. I was the most valuable asset in Marcus's portfolio. He had fought for me, bled for me, held me while I cried. But wasn't that just a CEO protecting his investment? If I let him in, if I let myself need him, it would only be a matter of time before he consumed me, just like my family did. I couldn't survive being broken twice. My hands shaking, I booted up my laptop. I pulled up the encrypted digital copy of our original proxy marriage contract. My fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting a new ironclad addendum. An hour later, the front door opened with a click. Marcus walked in still wearing his workout gear, his hair damp from the gym. In his hand was a small, grease-stained paper bag. "I found a bakery that makes those terrible sugar-coated cronuts you mentioned," he said, his voice thick with morning gravel and an endearing tentative warmth. He set the bag on the kitchen island and looked at me. His smile faded instantly. He could smell it. My pheromones had soured, turning from warm vanilla into something sharp, defensive, and acidic. The alpha in him immediately went on high alert, his dark eyes scanning the room for a threat before locking on to my rigid posture. "Julian," he asked, taking a step forward, "what is wrong?" "I updated the contract," I said. My voice was completely flat. It was the voice of the apathetic slacker, the mask I wore to push the world away. Marcus stopped dead. "What?" I turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. Clause 4B, postpartum financial severance. The threat level to my life has significantly increased since yesterday. Therefore, my compensation needs to reflect the hazard. I have drafted a revised payout structure for when I hand over the child and dissolve the marriage. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. The air grew thick-heavy with the suffocating scent of burnt espresso. Marcus stared at the screen and then slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. The warmth from last night was entirely gone, replaced by a devastating, confused agony that he frantically tried to hide behind his boardroom persona. "You are asking for a clean break," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "After the delivery, you are planning your exit strategy." That was always the deal, Marcus. I was a proxy, a vessel. Just because you played the hero yesterday does not mean we are suddenly a real family. He flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but I saw it. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't know how to navigate emotions. He only knew logic, leverage, and control. "You are not leaving," Marcus commanded, his alpha tone bleeding into his words. "You are crucial to this empire, Julian. You are carrying my heir. I will double whatever number you typed on that screen. I will buy you your own private island if you want, but you are not breaking this contract. Crucial to this empire, carrying my heir." The words hit me like physical blows. My chest cracked open, the festering wounds of my past bursting to the surface. "Is that all I am to you?" I screamed, my voice echoing off the glass walls. I slammed the laptop shut. "An incubator for your legacy, a crucial asset for your empire." "That is not what I meant," Marcus gritted out, taking a frantic step toward me. "Do not touch me." I scrambled backward, tears hot and angry spilling down my cheeks. "You think I am just a lazy idiot, do you not? You think I wear sweatpants and sleep all day because I am worthless. I was a genius, Marcus. I built the Hayes network from the ground up when I was a teenager, and they wrung me out until I was coughing up blood, all while telling me how much they valued me." Marcus froze, his eyes widening in pure shock as the pieces of my broken past finally snapped together in his brilliant mind. I became useless to survive. I choked out, wrapping my arms around my stomach. "Because if I have nothing to give, no one can use me. But now you have a claim on my body. You have a claim on my baby. I will not let you turn me into a corporate asset. I will not let you destroy whatever is left of me." "Julian, please," Marcus whispered, his voice shattering. The ruthless CEO was gone, leaving a desperate man standing in the ruins of his own penthouse. He reached out a trembling hand. "I do not want to use you. I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to ask you to stay." I looked away, staring out at the unforgiving Seattle skyline, my heart breaking into a million irreparable pieces. "You get the baby," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You get the merger, I get the money, and I disappear. We stick to the contract, Marcus. It is safer that way." I walked past him, locking myself in the guest bedroom. I slid down the door until I hit the floor, burying my face in my knees, and wept for the future I was too terrified to choose. The Cold War lasted 3 agonizing weeks. We lived like two ghosts haunting the same glass penthouse, separated by an ocean of unspoken words and a locked guest bedroom door. Marcus kept his promise. He gave me space, but the cost was written in the deepening shadows under his eyes and the bitter burnt edge to his espresso scent. While I hid in my oversized hoodies, nursing my growing stomach and my broken pride, Marcus was fighting a war on 2 fronts. He was systematically hunting down the mercenaries who attacked me, and he was battling his own board of directors. The legacy board members, led by my sleazy uncle Arthur Vance, had finally orchestrated their coup. On a bleak Thursday morning, an emergency shareholder meeting was called. The agenda was a vote of no confidence to strip Marcus of his CEO title, citing his reckless PR stunt and erratic leadership. I watched Marcus tie a Windsor knot in the mirror by the front door. He looked like a king walking to the guillotine, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of a collapsing empire. "I will have security stay outside your door today," Marcus said quietly and not meeting my eyes. "Whatever happens in that boardroom, your accounts are fully funded. The clinic has been dealt with. You are safe, Julian. That is all that matters." He stepped onto the private elevator before I could say a word. The doors slid shut, sealing me in the oppressive silence of the penthouse. I stood there for 5 minutes. I touched my stomach, feeling a tiny reassuring flutter against my palm. I was supposed to be the useless, apathetic Omega. I was supposed to take the money and disappear. That was the survival plan. But as the faint scent of his cedarwood lingered in the air, a fierce, protective rage ignited in my chest. No one takes what is mine. I sprinted to my laptop. I pulled the encrypted drive from beneath my mattress and plugged it in. The Hayes family thought I was a lazy idiot. They forgot that when I was a teenager, I built the foundational software architecture that their entire company, and now the merged Sterling Hayes network, ran on. I had left back doors in the code that not even their highest-paid cybersecurity firms knew existed. My fingers blurred across the keyboard. The lethargy of the past month evaporated, replaced by the lethal focus of a coding prodigy. I bypassed their firewalls in 3 minutes. I dug into the legacy board's private servers, tracking offshore wire transfers, hidden shell companies, and embezzled funds. 45 minutes later, I was stepping out of a cab in front of the Sterling Corporation headquarters. I didn't bother changing. I was wearing gray sweatpants, my faded hoodie, and my U-shaped travel pillow slung around my neck. I looked like a lost college student except for the noticeable curve of my stomach. I bypassed the frantic receptionists swiping a master keycard I had just programmed on my phone and rode the executive elevator to the 50th floor. The glass-walled boardroom was packed. Marcus sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, his expression completely blank, while Arthur Vance stood holding a laser pointer and a smug smile. And therefore, the board finds Mr. Sterling unfit to guide this merger, Vance was saying, his voice echoing through the tense room. I kicked the double doors open. They hit the walls with a thunderous sound. The entire room froze. 50 heads snapped toward me in pure shock. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor, his alpha scent flaring with instant panic. "Is you Julian?" Marcus breathed. "What are you doing here?" "Sorry, I am late." I deadpanned, waddling past a group of paralyzed executives. Pregnancy brain. It makes you forget things. Like, for instance, forgetting to hide your offshore embezzlement trails, Arthur. I reached the head of the table. Without asking for permission, I pulled the HDMI cable from Vance's laptop and plugged it directly into mine. I hit the enter key. The massive projector screen behind Marcus flickered. Vance's smug PowerPoint vanished, replaced by a cascading wall of bank records, wire transfers, and damning emails between the legacy board members. "What the hell is this?" Vance sputtered, his face draining of all color. "This is me being useful," I said, my voice ringing out cold and sharp in the dead, silent room. I tapped the screen. "That is $3 million transferred from the Sterling Pension Fund into a shell company in the Cayman Islands owned by you, Arthur. And here is the correspondence where you hired corporate mercenaries to attack a pregnant Omega, to force a miscarriage, and destabilize the CEO." Chaos erupted. Board members began shouting, scrambling out of their chairs. Vance lunged toward my laptop, his face purple with rage. Before Vance could even cross a foot of distance, Marcus intercepted him. Marcus grabbed Vance by the lapels of his custom suit and shoved him violently against the glass wall. The impact rattled the entire room. "Security!" Marcus roared, his voice vibrating with pure lethal alpha dominance. "Escort the legacy board out of my building and call the federal authorities. We have a lot of evidence to hand over." I didn't wait to watch the arrests. I slammed my laptop shut, the adrenaline suddenly crashing, leaving my knees weak. I turned and walked out of the boardroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. I barely made it into Marcus's private office before the door swung open behind me. Marcus stepped inside his chest, heaving, his eyes completely dark. He kicked the heavy mahogany door shut and threw the deadbolt. A sharp click echoed in the room. We were alone. The soundproofing blocked out the chaos of the hallway entirely. "You hacked the most secure corporate network in North America," Marcus said, his voice a low, disbelieving rumble. He slowly walked toward me. "You saved my company. You saved me. You said I was crucial to the empire." I muttered, looking down at my worn sneakers, suddenly terrified by the intensity in his gaze. I figured I should earn my paycheck. Marcus stopped right in front of me. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of heavy parchment paper. I recognized it instantly. It was the original proxy marriage contract along with the brutal postpartum addendum I had drafted. Without a word, Marcus gripped the heavy paper in both hands and tore it directly down the middle. He tore it again and again, letting the shredded pieces fall like snow onto the expensive carpet. I stared at the shredded paper, my breath catching in my throat. "What are you doing?" "I do not need a contract," Marcus said, stepping into my space, his large hands coming up to gently frame my face. His thumbs brushed over my cheekbones. "I do not need the merger. I do not care if the board burns this entire building to the ground. Julian, I did not choose you to secure an empire. I chose you because you are the only thing in my entire life that makes me want to come home." The fortress I had spent 10 years building around my heart finally completely shattered. "I am terrified, Marcus," I whispered, a tear slipping down my cheek. I do not know how to be a partner. I do not know how to do this without getting hurt." "Then we will be terrified together," Marcus murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "Let me take care of you, not because you are useful, not because you are an asset, just because you are you." I looked up into his eyes, seeing the raw, unguarded desperation of a man who was offering me his entire soul. I didn't push him away. I reached up, my fingers tangling in the collar of his expensive shirt, and pulled him down to me. When our lips met, it wasn't a desperate collision. It was a surrender. The dark, bitter espresso of his scent melted into my warm vanilla, wrapping around us in a perfect, unbreakable seal. I closed my eyes, kissing him back with everything I had, finally stepping out of the shadows and into the light. 6 months later, the Seattle skyline was still aggressively gray, weeping a relentless Sunday morning downpour against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. But the inside of the glass fortress had fundamentally changed. It no longer felt like a sterile high-tech terrarium waiting for a hostile corporate takeover. It felt entirely embarrassingly domestic. I was currently stranded on the oversized living room sofa, feeling less like a former tech prodigy and more like a heavily pregnant, thoroughly spoiled manatee. I was engulfed in a meticulously constructed nest of fleece blankets, wearing my signature faded gray hoodie, which now barely stretched over the massive 8-month curve of my stomach, and my trusty U-shaped travel pillow. From my fortress of laziness, I had a perfect view of the open kitchen. Marcus Sterling, the ruthless billionaire CEO, who used to run his empire on 3 hours of sleep and pure spite, was currently wrestling with a waffle iron. He wasn't wearing a lethal Tom Ford suit. In a victory that I considered my greatest achievement to date, Marcus was wearing soft gray sweatpants and a plain black t-shirt. His hair was ruffled, falling over his forehead, completely devoid of its usual immaculate boardroom styling. The air in the penthouse was thick and warm, saturated with the perfect harmonious blend of our pheromones. His dark espresso and sharp cedarwood had completely mellowed, wrapping gently around my sweet sun-warmed vanilla. It was a scent that meant safety. It meant home. "If you burn the kitchen down, Sterling, I am not getting up to grab the fire extinguisher," I called out lazily, popping a green grape into my mouth. "You will have to deal with the insurance claim yourself." Marcus didn't even turn around. He just snorted, expertly flipping a golden brown waffle onto a ceramic plate. "Your lack of faith in my culinary skills is insulting, Julian. Need I remind you who made the flawless beef bourguignon last night? You followed a YouTube tutorial while muttering death threats at a carrot," I pointed out, shifting awkwardly against the pillows. "And my back hurts. The heir to your empire is currently using my bladder as a trampoline." Marcus abandoned the waffle iron instantly. He grabbed the plate, poured a steaming mug of Earl Grey tea, and walked over to the living room. He set the breakfast on the coffee table and immediately sank onto his knees on the rug right in front of me. "Which side?" he asked, his voice dropping into that low, impossibly soft register he reserved strictly for me and the baby. "Lower back." "And my feet," I grumbled, offering him a pathetic pout that I knew worked entirely too well. Marcus chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound that vibrated straight through our bond. He gently grabbed my swollen ankles, lifting them onto his lap, and began to massage my feet with slow, firm pressure. I groaned, letting my head fall back against the travel pillow, my eyes fluttering shut. "You are a very competent footstool, Mr. CEO," I murmured happily. "I aim to please Mr. Hayes," Marcus replied, his thumbs working out a particularly stubborn knot in my arch. A lot had changed in 6 months. The Sterling-Hayes merger had gone through, but on entirely different terms. Following my impromptu presentation of his offshore embezzlement trail, Arthur Vance and the rest of the Legacy Board were currently facing a litany of federal indictments. They were completely neutralized. As for the Hayes family, my lovely blood relatives who had tried to sell me off like livestock, they had attempted to reach out exactly once after the dust settled, hoping to cash in on my new position as Marcus's legally bonded mate. Marcus had deployed his legal team like a pack of rabid attack dogs. My family was officially barred from ever contacting me or stepping foot inside a Sterling-owned building ever again. I had officially retired at the ripe old age of 28. My new full-time job was napping, eating, and occasionally writing brilliant, impenetrable code for the Sterling cybersecurity grid whenever I got bored. I wasn't useless anymore. I just only used my genius for the one person who actually deserved it. Suddenly, my stomach gave a sharp, violent lurch. The fabric of my hoodie actually rippled. Marcus stopped massaging my feet. He carefully shifted his weight, moving his large, warm hand from my ankle to rest perfectly over the side of my stomach. The moment his palm made contact, the baby kicked again, a tiny, determined thud, right against Marcus's hand. The ruthless corporate dragon completely melted. Marcus's dark eyes widened, shining with that raw, unguarded awe that still caught me off guard. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to the curve of my belly, his cedar scent flaring with intense, overwhelming love and absolute protection. "He is impatient," Marcus murmured against the cotton of my hoodie. "He wants to meet you." "He is an alpha, and he is a sterling," I sighed, running my fingers through Marcus's messy dark hair. "He is genetically predisposed to be demanding and bossy. I am going to have to deal with two of you." Marcus lifted his head, resting his chin gently on my stomach, and looked up at me. His eyes were entirely clear. There were no more shadows, no more walls, no more agonizing exhaustion. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked quietly. It wasn't a question born of insecurity, but of wonder. The clinic, the glitch, the contract. I looked down at the man kneeling before me, the man who owned half the city yet treated me like I was the most precious thing in the entire world. I thought about the terrified, apathetic Omega I had been 6 months ago, hiding in my apartment convinced that being loved meant being used. I reached down, cupping his jaw, my thumb brushing over his cheekbone. "No." I smiled the truth, ringing absolute and clear through the bond connecting our hearts. "It was the best mistake I ever made." Marcus smiled back, leaning up to press his lips softly, perfectly against mine. Between a city of cold glass and the ruthless calculations of boardrooms, we had found something entirely real. In a world that had tried to trap us both, we had found our absolute freedom in each other.